Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jacqueline Davis, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Barbara G. and Lawrence A. Fleischman Executive Director of the Performing Arts Library. And we're so thrilled to have so many of you here this evening at the culmination of this wonderful festival. Isn't it true that we all think how our lives are impacted by others in ways that you never expected? For example, I met Eleanor Park when I first came to New York City a number of years ago. She was in a band, now she's at the Metropolitan Opera. I met Peter Sellers at the Adelaide Festival many years before that. And Ann Bass, who is the most extraordinary dance advocate, became known to me when I came here to the library. Now, Ann's and Eleanor's interest and commitment to supporting Cambodia arts, as well as Peter Sellers' interest in Cambodia, have led us all to the privilege we are about to experience this evening. We are indeed fortunate, and I feel especially fortunate to have been invited to participate with so many arts organizations throughout the city in the Season of Cambodia. The Season of Cambodia, I'm sure you probably all well know by now, is a special initiative of Cambodian Living Arts in partnership with Cambodia's leading arts organizations and New York's most vibrant cultural and academic institutions. The festival has featured more than 125 Cambodian performing arts and visual artists in New York City stages, screens, galleries, public spaces, creating a broad and dynamic platform for Cambodian cultural treasures to be shared with an international audience. We're so pleased to have all of these folks with us this evening. And it's my special pleasure to introduce one of our stars, the curator of the Jerome Robbins Dance Division, Jan Schmidt, who will tell you about this evening's program. Thank you.
Well, welcome to this program celebrating Cambodian dance, presented by the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts Jerome Robbins Dance Division with Season of Cambodia, initiative of Cambodian Living Arts and Brooklyn Academy of Music. We're delighted to be working with these partners here tonight to bring you Her Royal Highness Princess Norodom Bhupa Devi and an interview with Peter Sellers. At the outset, I would first like to thank Ann Bass for all she has done to make this program possible and to make so much of this beautiful Season of Cambodia successful. I can't thank all of the individuals who helped make this program happen. There are too many, but just to mention a couple of people who are instrumental: Plun Prin, Vana San, Ellen Dennis, and Supia Nutt. The video clips that we are going to see tonight are excerpts from rare archival footage in the dance division. One of the clips is taken from a taping at Brooklyn Academy of Music in 1971, recorded by the dance division. Also are two excerpts of recent performances of the Royal Ballet of Cambodia. This is a sneak preview from the Khmer Dance Project, an initiative of the Center for Khmer Studies with the Jerome Robbins Dance Division and a grant from Ann Bass. Led by the former dancer and scholar Supia Nutt, the Khmer Dance Project documented classical Khmer ballet through filmed interviews and performances. The elderly masters were the priority, so the Khmer Dance Project has interviewed on video 3 generations of artists who kept this art alive during an extraordinarily difficult period. It is anticipated that these recordings will be completed by June of 2013. Also, you probably all know the Royal Ballet of Cambodia will perform The Legend of Apsara Mara with the movement constructed by Her Royal Highness Princess Norodom Bhupa Devi at Brooklyn Academy of Music May 2nd through May 4th. When the program is over, you are also all invited to a reception on the first floor plaza level. There you will find the amazing glass photographs of dancers from the Royal Ballet of Cambodia. Recently discovered and restored, the 1927 images capture the dancers performing the postures and gestures from the classical canon. Interviewing Her Royal Highness tonight is Peter Sellers, opera, theater, and festival director who is known for groundbreaking interpretations of classic works. He has brought 20th century and contemporary operas to the stage and has been a driving force in the creation of many new works. With this, he is uniquely connected with the myth-making and its importance in transforming a Cambodia for today. Needing no introduction, but I will still attempt to introduce Her Royal Highness Princess Norodom Bhupa Devi, who began at the age of 6 her classical dance training at the School of Dance in the Royal Palace. The princess gave her first professional performance at the age of 8 in honor of the King of Laos. She immediately became recognized as a distinguished dancer, and in the late 80s and early 90s, the princess trained young dancers on the Cambodian-Thai border. Following the Paris conference of 1991, she returned to Cambodia with her father, King Sihanouk, and continued to work in the cultural domain. She continues to choreograph, adding works to the classical repertoire of the Royal Ballet. She has been instrumental in nurturing a new generation of gifted artists in close collaboration with her colleagues who survived the tumultuous period of the Khmer Rouge. The Royal Ballet that tours internationally today does so under her leadership and guidance. Recently, the Royal Government of Cambodia announced her as a living national heritage. The interpreter for tonight is Ruthisal Kang, Program Director of Marita Performing Arts. Immediately after my speaking, the video, which will run for about 10 minutes, will be followed by their interview. So now I first introduce to you our Peter Sellers, Her Royal Highness Princess Norodom Devi, and Ruthisal Kang. Thank you.
For a beginning, the basic postures and gestures are painstakingly taught the little novices. In time, the ballet mistresses will teach them the various dance movements, then entire parts. But years will have passed. The little apprentices will have grown into mature girls before they fully acquire the ability to move through the complicated postures and gestures gracefully, without effort. A gesture that is easy to understand, but which requires much practice to execute with grace, is the Anjali salutation. It signifies adoration, homage, worship, respect. In its simpler form, it is the gesture of greeting used by the Khmers in everyday life. Fluid grace and extraordinary flexibility of the joints are requisites for a royal dancer. To acquire them, the students regularly exercise for suppleness. The natural suppleness of youth comes to the aid of the students in these complicated, difficult exercises.
we are in the presence of course, Princess Norodom Buffa Devi. Here she is. You know, when we say the Royal Ballet in London, we don't really assume that Queen Elizabeth was the Margot Fonteyn of the great years, and that when you go to the Royal Ballet, whatever you see will have been choreographed by Queen Elizabeth. However, in Phnom Penh, it's another story. And the princess has in fact been part of the tradition from the age of 5. But the tradition itself goes back a long way with the royal family. And to that point where the royal family, of course, were appointed by the gods and ancestors. And the royal family had a sacred function. And the first tradition of dance in Cambodia, you did not dance for the living. Dance was intended for the ancestors, for the gods. And so you danced for those who were present but watching, but not visible. And the beauty and perfection of the gods was mirrored back to them by these extraordinary dancers. So the gods knew that on earth we were thinking of them and aspiring to that level of balance, fineness, integrity, grace, humility, and gentleness of being. The Apsara, which we just saw in this last section, is the angelic figure, the spirit being who you see in all the temples in Cambodia from the classic period. These extraordinary women who are celestial beings who come to earth to represent poise and forgiveness. We think the Apsara dance existed always. In fact, it was choreographed for the first time in 1962 by the princess's grandmother for her. So we're with the first angel of forgiveness. And that footage that you saw is when this dance, which all of us assumed went back centuries, was actually new in 1962. So I'm wondering, Princess, would you kindly invite us into the spirit of this Apsara and describe for us creating this dance the first time and what is inside these angelic gestures?
ចឹងព្រះអង្គស្នាដៃរបាំអប្សរានឹងផងដែរគឺបង្កើតដោយជីដូនរបស់ព្រះអង្គផ្ទាល់ហើយព្រះអង្គគឺជាតួឯកទី1ដែលគេបានឃើញនៅទីនេះដែលធ្លាប់រាំតាំងពីយូរណាស់មកហើយព្រះអង្គអាចមានទូលពុយពរនីអំពីរបាំអប្សរានេះផងដែរដើម្បីឲ្យអ្នកនៅទីនេះបានយល់អំពីរបាំអប្សរានឹងថាយ៉ាងម៉េចដែរ
របាំអប្សរានេះគឺថាជីដូនខ្ញុំលោកបានបង្កើតមកនៅឆ្នាំ1962គឺថាពេលនោះឪពុកខ្ញុំប្រពន្ធជាលោកទៅធ្វើទស្សនកិច្ចនៅប្រទេសបារាំងនៅឆ្នាំ1964បានជើងត្រូវរៀបចំ2ឆ្នាំមុនគឺថា62ឆ្នាំ1962ហើយកាលនោះគឺថាសម្ភារបំពាក់របាំខ្មែរយើងនឹងគឺថាមិនអាចថាធ្វើយ៉ាងណាឲ្យដោយអប្សរាដែលមានរូបចម្លាក់នឹងក៏វត្តទេពីព្រោះដោយសាររូបចម្លាក់នោះអត់មានពាក់អាវនៅនឹងក៏វត្តអញ្ចឹងម្លាយជីដូនខ្ញុំលោកថាខ្ញុំធ្វើយ៉ាងម៉េចដើម្បីថាធ្វើអប្សរានឹងចេញ បានជាយើងបានពិគ្រោះគ្នាជាមួយគ្នាទៅបានរៀបចំធ្វើសម្ភារបំពាក់ជាពណ៌សាច់ដែរតែពាក់អាវពណ៌សាច់តែមកកត់ក្តីគឺអលង្ការអប្សរាក្តីយើងយកទម្រង់មកសិក្សាគឺថាទម្រង់មានច្រើនណាស់ចាមានផ្នែកសិក្សាទម្រង់ខាងហើយបេតិកភណ្ឌខាងបាយ័នចាទី10 11ខាងអង្គរវត្តទី9ទី10យើងមិនអាចថាតើយើងយកណាមួយព្រោះមានច្រើនបែបណាស់ទាំងអលង្ការនេះប៉ុន្តែទីបំផុតជីដូនខ្ញុំសម្រេចថាយកតាមក្បាច់អង្គរវត្ត
So this dance was choreographed. I will try my best.
This is Sal. Thank you.
This dance was choreographed in 1962, and that was planned for the 1964 visit by my father, the late King Norom Sihanouk, who was making visit to France to see General Charles de Gaulle. So we had to do it 2 years in advance. And we think about the dancing movement, we also thinking about the costume as well. And we look at the bas relief of Apsara on the temple, and my grandmother raised her eyebrow and think about it because it was actually half naked. So how can we design a costume to do that? So my grandmother think about, okay, so we use this outfit that has the color, a very similar color of the skin, so that kind of give that experience of the bas relief. And the crown as well, we have to study all these bas relief of the Bayon temple, of the Angkor temple. We look at a lot of temple, and then my grandmother finally decided to use the crown picture from the Angkor temple, and that was Angkor Wat temple. That's how we made it.
Would you tell us about being 5 years old in the palace and beginning to study the dance in the midst of life inside the palace?
ព្រះអង្គកាលហ្នឹងព្រះអង្គមានបញ្ជនត្រឹមតែ5ព្រះភាសាហើយជាជីវិតជាព្រះកុមារីមួយព្រះអង្គនៅក្នុងបរមរាជវាំងតើជីវិតនៅក្នុងការហាត់រៀនទម្រង់របាំហ្នឹងយ៉ាងដូចមិនដែរបង
ជាទំនៀមទម្លាប់របស់ព្រះរាជវង្សានុវង្សខ្មែរគឺថាព្រះអង្គចស្ត្រីរាជបុត្រព្រះមហាក្សត្រហ្នឹងអត់ត្រូវខ្លាយខ្លួនទៅជាតារាឯកក្នុងវិស័យរបាំទេ
Thank you. So in the royal family of Cambodia, the daughter of the king were not supposed to be a dancer.
តែជាទំនៀមទម្លាប់របស់ព្រះរាជវង្សានុវង្សខ្មែរដែរគឺថាជាប្រជាស្ត្រីត្រូវចេះធ្វើម្ហូបចេះដេរប៉ាក់ចេះរាំដែរ
However, we have to learn to cook, to do the sewing, and to know about dancing as well.
តែដូចជាអស់លោកបានឃើញហើយនៅក្នុងប៉ុនមិញគឺថាយើងមានការហាត់ក្មេងៗតូចៗហ្នឹងហាត់រៀនរាល់ព្រឹកនៅសាលចន្ទយាក្នុងព្រះបរមរាជវាំង
So you saw the rehearsal activity of the really young dancer that is their every morning training at the Chanchaya, which is a pavilion in the royal palace.
ខ្ញុំដែលអាយុ5ឆ្នាំខ្ញុំគេមិនខ្ញុំរំក្រោយគេរំហាត់ស្វាផងហាត់យ៉ាក់ផងហាត់គ្រប់តនៅខាងក្រោយគេទេអត់នៅមុខគេទេ
So at the age of 5, I was one of those dancers, but I was the last. I was the one behind at the back. So I did everything. I did the monkey. I did the giant. I did all the roles.
với tớ ở bốc nhóm lục lần chẳng lúc ta vừa lý sao nhưng một cả thì thời ta tới nhóm hát liên hỏi trầm trời làm mình cứ tha vô kêu cha lại còn cha còn cho nó còn mau bằng liên ở cá ở nhóm tới liên được cha còn liên rồi bị còn bay cha.
So my father, who was the king, my father, noticed my interest in that, and he said, "Okay, you must take this seriously." So he said, I should go and I should train with all these old masters so that to really get to master the classical dance. There are some masters who are really old and think that they cannot come to teach me, so I have to go to their home to get the training from them.
Đôi khi là ba mẹ bọn nó còn mình nhận đấy cái là nhóm tự bằng hát để tự dân được ra còn này còn bằng dân này đây là không còn.
The dance piece that you saw I was dancing, I did not practice that in the palace, actually at the home of my master.
And were you a very difficult little girl? You insisted to your dad you would be the first princess to be a great dancer?
តែការនឹងដោយហេតុថាព្រះអង្គមានសពតិទៅនឹងការរំនឹងខ្លាំងព្រះអង្គបានទីព្រះបិតាថាព្រះបិតាទូងគុំចង់រំខ្ញុំមិនចាស់ចង់រំ
ខ្ញុំទាំងអស់មានបងប្អូនស្រី5នាក់មានបងប្អូនខ្ញុំចង់រំដែរចង់រំទាំងអស់គ្នាហាត់រំទាំងអស់គ្នាក៏ប៉ុន្តែមានបងប្អូនខ្ញុំមួយនោះធាត់បងខ្ញុំថាណាកុំឲ្យលុយសុំកុំរងពុកខ្ញុំសោកលុយបងអូនខ្ញុំថាសុំចិត្តឲ្យលុយតែសុំកុំរង
So I have also other younger daughter who also wish to be a dancer, sister who wish to be a dancer, and I have one sister who is actually fat. So my father had to literally bribe her with some money so that she doesn't dance.
This is how a great career begins. Tell us about your grandmother. She's a very, very special figure. She was really kept the tradition of the dance alive in a very powerful way, but I also think of her as a great innovator. Would you tell us a little bit about your grandmother?
សូមបងមានបន្ទូលពីជីដូនរបស់ព្រះអង្គព្រោះលោកមិនគ្រាន់តែជាអ្នកថែរក្សាប្រពៃណីរបាំបុរាណទេប៉ុន្តែលោកជាអ្នកបង្កើតថ្មីជាស្ថាបនិកក្នុងរបាំបុរាណស្នាដៃថ្មីជាច្រើនផងទៀតដែរសូមមានបន្ទូលអំពីលោក
ខ្ញុំសូមទូលលោកពីតែសិលាបន្តិចក្នុងcáiរឿងបងខ្ញុំចង់មានន័យថាបងខ្ញុំលោកគាត់មានសាច់ប៉ុន្តែមិនមែនថាគាត់មានសាច់អាក្រក់ទេតែគាត់ថាកាលណាទម្រង់ល្ខោនពេលព្រឹករំនោះយកមនុស្សទូហើយជើងទូមិនអាចយកមនុស្សធំខ្ពស់បានទេ
So let me go back to my sister's story a bit. So my sister is fat, but she's not ugly. It's just that in classical dance they really need the correct like body shape, small, skinny, and tiny body, so that it really fit well with the dance movement and with the costume as well.
Cảពេលឪពុកខ្ញុំលោកឡើងក្រុងរាជនេះក្នុងឆ្នាំ1941នៅក្នុងការគ្រប់គ្រងរបស់ប្រទេសបារាំងប្រទេសបារាំង Français ល្ខោនប្រយុទ្ធជាក្នុងការគ្រប់គ្រងរបស់ព្រះមហាក្សត្រខ្មែរតាំងពីជំនាន់ដើមរហូតមកជំនាន់ឪពុកខ្ញុំនេះហើយដល់ជាងក្នុងប្រទេសតារបស់យើងមិនអាចគេថាការបិទជេគេថាថាវិការកញ្ចប់ថាវិការសម្រាប់ប្រជាជនទាំងមូលហ្នឹងគឺថាមិនសូវមានសម្បូរទេហើយនេះហើយបានល្ខោនអាចចាក់ស្លឹកចិត្តចុះតាំងពីខ្ញុំលំហែតាំងពី ហូតមកដល់ចតុមុខ
So my father became king in 1941. Before that, the country was under the French protectorate, and the budget to give to the Royal Ballet troupe was so limited. So the Royal Ballet was not very strong at all because we were under the French, we have little budget because of the colonization.
ប៉ុន្តែដល់ខ្ញុំស្រីរីដែរជីដូនខ្ញុំលោកយកលោកខោនព្រះរាជទ្រព្យហ្នឹងយកមកកាន់កាប់ផ្ទាល់លោកចេញវិជានឹងអង្គលោកផ្ទាល់លោកសុំអញ្ជើញគ្រូចាស់ចាស់ដែលគាត់នៅរស់នៅសល់សេសសល់នៅរស់សូមគាត់អញ្ជើញមកជួយបង្ហាត់ហើយពីដើមកាលណាយើងរំលខោនគឺថាពីជីដូនតមកកូនពីប្រអាយមកកូនចៅគឺថានៅក្នុងរង្វង់រសាតែតាពីជីដូនខ្ញុំលោកមកកាន់លោកមានបើសាលាគឺថាទទួលណែកុមារីក្មេងៗគ្រប់សន្ទាប់ទាំងអស់ចង់ណាចង់មករៀនរំអាចមកចុះឈ្មោះរៀនរំតែមានថ្នាក់រំបង្ហាត់រាល់ព្រឹកគឺឃើញ
So when my father became king and the leader of Cambodia, my grandmother has all these resources that she needs in order to revive, in order to preserve the Royal Ballet, the Cambodian classical dance. Cambodian classical dance in the past was only family business. The grandmother passed it on to the mother and passed it on to the daughter. It's only like that. When my grandmother managed that, she opened a school so that people from all walks of life can study Royal Ballet.
One of the things that's very interesting is all over the world in the 40s and 50s, very, very old traditions were reinvented, and your grandmother reinvented the Cambodian dance in very profound ways. So I'd love you to continue to tell us about the incredible changes she made.
អញ្ចឹងកាលជាទស្សវត្សឆ្នាំ40 50ហ្នឹងឯងនៅក្នុងប្រពៃណីនៃរបាំឬក៏សិល្បៈនៅក្នុងពិភពលោកមានការវិវត្តជាច្រើនហើយនៅក្នុងនោះបើយើងកំណត់ទៅលើប្រទេសកម្ពុជាប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាជីដូនរបស់ព្រះអង្គគឺជាអ្នកដែលស្ថាបនិកផងហើយជាអ្នកផ្លាស់ប្ដូរវិវត្តទៅធ្វើឲ្យមានការអភិវឌ្ឍខ្លាំងនៅក្នុងវិស័យសិល្បៈព្រះអង្គអាចមានព្រះបន្ទូលអំពីការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរហ្នឹងតើព្រះជីដូនលោកបានផ្លាស់ប្ដូរយ៉ាងម៉េចដើម្បីឲ្យកាន់តែប្រសើរទៅហើយនឹងរឹងមាំទៅនៅក្នុងវិស័យរបាំបុរាណហ្នឹងផងដែរ
ពីដើមជាគសិនជាជាងបងរឿងរាមាយាណារៀងគេខ្មែររៀងគេគេថារបាំរាមាយាណាមានរយៈពេលវែងណាគឺថាចំណាអាចរំដល់រកខែcũngមានដែរអញ្ចឹងជាដូនខ្ញុំថាដើម្បីយើងបើកទូលាយឲ្យទីថាប្រជាជនទាំងអស់យើងអាចទទួលបានដូចអាចបានអាចមើលបានឬក៏អាចគេថាយកមកសម្ដែងធ្វើជាទស្សនកិច្ចជាក្រៅប្រទេសឬក៏ទទួលភ្ញៀវរដ្ឋបានជ័យមកគឺថាលោកយកឈុតកាត់ឲ្យខ្លីៗតែមានរយៈពេលសមរម្យដើម្បីទទួលភ្ញៀវបាទ
So the existing repertoire of classical dance at that time can take days of performance, and because it is the performance of Rimke, which is the Cambodia version of Ramayana. My grandmother looked at this and think it's impossible to present it to the audience when it's that long. She want to widen the audience, so she tried to choreograph and try to shorten pieces, try to select scenes so that it can be presentable to the distinguished international guests and to the state visitor to the country. So her intention was to present it, to make it more accessible to the people, local and international.
I think one of the most interesting parts of the Cambodian dance is most Cambodians never saw it. It was really for guests inside the palace as a sacred ceremony and as strictly a palace event. And so we've really seen the reinvention of Cambodian dance, from the middle of the 20th century on. And it's on quite an accelerating arc of innovation. And it's very interesting because, as always with innovation, some of the oldest gestures have been reimagined for our new situation and for the way we feel things. Would you describe the creative act of preservation?
អញ្ចឹងកាលនោះនៅពេលដែលរបាំដំបូងជារបាំសក្ការៈជាការងារសក្ការៈនៅក្នុងវាំងតែក្រោយមកទៀតក៏ត្រូវបានផ្លាស់ប្ដូរទៅជាអ្វីដែលថ្មីមួយហើយភាសាក្បាច់ឬក៏ចលនាក្បាច់ហ្នឹងគឺផ្លាស់ប្ដូរទៅតាមសាច់រឿងដែលស័ក្តិសមទៅនឹងសម័យកាលពេលនោះដែរអញ្ចឹងព្រះអង្គអាចមានបន្ទូលតើតើការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរហ្នឹងតើជាបច្ចេកទេសឬក៏ជាសិល្បៈហ្នឹងផ្លាស់ប្ដូរយ៉ាងដូចម្តេចដែរ
ជាថាដាច់ខាតគេថាយើងថែរក្សាក្បាច់បាតដែលមានក្បាច់ gesture វាពីដើមថាឡើងទៅ 4000 ហ្នឹងប៉ុន្តែទឹកខ្ញុំទៅផែជាខ្ទង់ដល់ផែទៅ 300 ផ្លែ300ក្បាច់ដៃដែលជាតំណាង language តំណាងភាសាហើយបាច់ទាំងអស់នោះយើងអបជាដូនខ្ញុំបាត់ដែរតាមពីខ្ញុំយើងអាចបាត់ប៉ុន្តែលោកខំឲ្យគូនោះមកដើម្បីយើងបង្រៀនបន្ថែមក្បាច់នឹងឲ្យបានច្រើនជាតែបាលមកហើយបានយកក្បាច់នឹងមកបំបែកជារឿងក្បាច់ជារបាំដូចជារបាំអប្សរាជាដើមគឺថាយើងយកក្បាច់ដើមតដែរយកមកបំបែកចាហើយយើងរើសចម្រៀងដើម្បីឲ្យចម្រើឲ្យស៊ីនឹងរបាំដែលតែងគឺជាអប្សរាចា
So we were very careful and attentive to the basic dancing movement of Royal Ballet. We tried to preserve all of that. All the dance master came together, and they believe that there are more than 4,000 dancing gestures in the tradition of Royal Ballet. However, it was lost. Some of the gestures were lost. So the assembly of the master was the chance for them to revive the existing gesture or to reimagine or recreate more gesture so that they have more dancing gesture and vocabulary to describe or to tell story through the dance. And they chose stories, more story in order to tell through the classical dance.
We have 4 beautiful dancers here. Let us see the results, please. Yes? And Sal, would you introduce the performers?
របាំបរិយាត្រាប់ជាដើមឡើងគឺថាសិតតែរំស្រីទាំងអស់
In Cambodia Royal Ballet, all the performers were females, except the monkey roll dancer. Even the giant roll, it's performed by the female dancer. The giant roll dancer. And that is the prince roll or male roll, the second dancer. The dancer from here is the female role, or the princess role.
Hanuman.
And that is the monkey role, of course. So I would like to introduce the dancer. The first dancer, the giant role, is Chomran Sompoa. The second dancer, the male role, is Chanchan Soda. The third dancer, the female role is Chap Chomran Tola. And the last dancer, the monkey role is Sưa Taura.
Xôm bằng hai bạch đập bố bạch chim với bạch mưa bạch mưa.
So let me demonstrate some movement, and this is the movement of looking, giant looking. The male role looking. The female role looking. And the monkey role. Okay.
Rồi tới bạch sập bài.
Being happy.
Bạch khăng.
Being angry.
Bạch ruồi.
Being sad.
Bạch dung.
And crying.
Rồi xôm sập bài bên mà đâu. Bạch xa lạnh.
And this is loving.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
អរគុណច្រើនណាស់បង
សូមកុំអាទៅមើលសូមធ្វើក្បាច់ហោះចូលមកបាច់ជើងចូល
So as they exit in the movement of flying.
And there they go flying. It's really beautiful tonight to be here in the treasure house of the New York Public Library. Can we just express enormous gratitude for every single treasure in this building? And the idea that we're performing for future generations who are not in the world yet, but they will come, and the same way that the princess and her grandmother stared at the tracings and the sculpture of the Apsaras on the Angkor Wat temple, future generations can look at videotape and see traces of something unimaginably beautiful and mysterious. And we're just so grateful to the staff of this building. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for this work. Just before we go, there's something I'm just dying to ask you, which is in America, we had this very exciting moment historically where George Balanchine came from the Russian Imperial Ballet, which was really for a very specific court situation, and said, no, we're going to reinvent this court art form for a democracy. And how do you take a court form and reimagine it now in a new democratic situation? One of the most powerful things George Balanchine did was not revive everything. He only chose to revive certain things and always put the traditional work next to new work. And so always the traditional and the new were next to each other in dialogue, creating a kind of new ecology where the traditional work had to be danced with more attention, aliveness, and content. And the new work had to be informed by the depth of tradition. Would you talk about that situation now in Cambodia? Obviously, everybody knows the story of the Khmer Rouge, but the fact that the dancers, because they represented the royal tradition, were the first people to be targeted and murdered. And so this tradition comes back, not just as it was, but representing something more. Would you talk to us about this, please?
អញ្ចឹងកាលពីអ្នករបាំដ៏ល្បីមួយមកពីប្រទេសរុស្ស៊ីឈ្មោះ George Balanchine នៅពេលដែលគាត់ជាអ្នករបាំបាលេដែលមកពីប្រទេសរុស្ស៊ីដែលកាលហ្នឹងគឺសម្រាប់តែក្នុងរាជវាំងនៅប្រទេសរុស្ស៊ីក្រោយមកទៀតគាត់បានចូលមកផ្លាស់ប្ដូរវាដើម្បីបង្កើតនៅរបាំហ្នឹងសម្រាប់ប្រទេសមួយសម្រាប់ទីកន្លែងមួយទៀតកលៈទេសៈមួយទៀតជាបែបប្រជាធិបតេយ្យបានការផ្លាស់ប្ដូររបាំទៅជាចរិតថ្មីអ្វីដែលគាត់បានធ្វើការនោះគឺគ្រាន់តែជ្រើសយកចំណុចខ្លះនៅក្នុងទម្រង់បុរាណនោះហើយយកមកកែតម្រួលឡើងវិញហើយគាត់ដាក់ទម្រង់បុរាណហ្នឹងហើយនឹងអាការកែតម្រួលថ្មីជាមួយគ្នាតែម្ដងហើយនឹងគឺត្រូវបានគេចាត់ទុកថាជាស្នាដៃដ៏អស្ចារ្យនៅក្នុងការវិវត្តទៅមុខរបស់ស្នាដៃបុរាណរបស់គេផងដែរសម្រាប់របាំបុរាណខ្មែរគឺយើងស្ថិតនៅក្នុងស្ថានភាពមួយដែលកាលនោះមានភាពរីកចម្រើនខ្លាំងក្រោយមកក៏មានរបបខ្មែរក្រហមអ្នកទាំងឡាយណាដែលតាក់ទងទៅនឹងជាបញ្ញវន្តជាសិល្បករត្រូវបានគេសម្លាប់រង្គាល ថ្នាក់ដៃនេះទោះបីជាយ៉ាងនេះក៏ដោយក៏មិនបានបាត់បង់ទេហើយបានរស់ឡើងមកវិញដោយសារតែការស្ដារឡើងវិញគ្រប់យ៉ាងនៅក្នុងប្រទេសទន្ទឹមនឹងមិនត្រឹមតែរស់ឡើងវិញតែមកកញ្ចប់តូចប៉ុណ្ណឹងទេក៏បានរីកថែមទៅទៀតអញ្ចឹងគឺទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងគឺសុទ្ធតែជាកិច្ចប្រឹងប្រែងរបស់គ្រូចាស់ចាស់ឬក៏ជាប្រសិទ្ធដឹកនាំដោយស្នាព្រះហស្ថព្រះអង្គផ្ទាល់ផងដែរព្រះអង្គអាចមានបន្ទូលតាក់ទងទៅនឹងការដែលបាត់បង់ទៅហើយធ្វើឡើងមកវិញហើយពង្រីកថែមទៀតនឹងតើត្រូវការអ្វីខ្លះហើយការនេះយើងបានធ្វើអ្វីខ្លះបានយើងអាចឈានមកដល់ថ្ងៃនេះឬក៏ស្នាដៃថ្មីដូចជារឿងដែលព្រះអង្គបង្ហាញនៅទីនេះតើការនោះបង្ហាញរឿងថ្មីបែបដូចយ៉ាងដូចម្ដេចដែរបង
លោកជួយបាល់អនស៊ីនគឡនបានប្រកាសស្នាដៃថ្មីគាត់ជាសិល្បករការនីដែលដល់ល្បីនៅប្រទេសរុស្ស៊ីសាំប្រទេសសវប៉ុន្តែគាត់មកនៅនេះគាត់ប្រកាសថ្មីប៉ុន្តែសាលាដែលនៅរុស្ស៊ីក៏គេនៅមានប៉ុន្តែគាត់បានជើញមកគាត់ប្រកាសស្នាដៃគាត់ថ្មីហើយប្រទេសកម្ពុជាយើងមិនមែនចឹងទេពីព្រោះមកដោយសាររបបបល័យពុជសាសខ្មែរក្រហមធ្វើឲ្យលេសបាត់អស់ហើយក៏ទៅយើងនៅសល់តែគ្រូតិចតួចណាស់មិនដល់ 10% ផងដែលគាត់នៅរស់ចឹងហើយបានតែយើងខំពុតដៃគ្នាធ្វើសាវជ្រាវឡើងវិញព្រោះវាបាត់នេះយើងគាត់អត់បាត់ទេចា George Balchin គាត់អត់បាត់ទេរបស់នៅមានស្រាប់ប៉ុន្តែគាត់បង្កើតស្នាដៃរបស់គាត់ឡើងថ្មីតែយើងវាបាត់ហើយយើងសាវយើងខំពុតដៃគ្នាដើម្បីរកការបាត់បង់នោះឲ្យត្រឡប់មកវិញសិនរួចបានត្រឡប់មកវិញហើយការងារយើងថប់ទាំងអស់គ្នានឹងយើងបានវិញហើយបានយើងហ៊ានដំណើរការបន្តិចម្ដងទៅមុខចា
So Joy Bonanchi is a great artist was a great artist and he came from Russia he tried to make music at the same time in Russia they still have this school of the ballet. So they have this existing structure, the physical space that still teach, that the ballet, the old ballet is still going on. And that is different from the situation in Cambodia because we had the Royal Ballet, but then the Khmer Rule really destroyed it. Only 10% of the people who know the Royal Ballet, of the artists, survived. So we were in a really, really difficult situation, and the revival process of the form is really one of the harder things to do.
Would you speak about creating new work now?
យ៉ាងមិនដែរតកតងទៅនឹងការបង្កើតស្នាដៃថ្មីដែលអភិវឌ្ឍថ្មីដែលព្រះអង្គបានជាស្នាព្រះហស្ថផ្ទាល់ព្រះអង្គថ្មីនេះបាទ
ជាដំបូងឡើងគឺថាដោយសារខ្ញុំរំដូចជារឿងអេណាបុសបាជាដើមដែលបានប្រចាំនៅទីនេះគឺថាការចំនួននោះខ្ញុំទៅអាយុ14ឆ្នាំចាជីដូនខ្ញុំលោកឲ្យខ្ញុំរំអេណាបុសបាចាខ្ញុំទៅអាយុ14ឆ្នាំទេហើយរឿងមួយទៀតរឿងនៃព្រាមតោហ្នឹងខ្ញុំរំធ្វើតួព្រាមតួសហ្នឹងហើយខ្ញុំរំទៅព្រាមតោផងខ្ញុំរំទៅតួសផងខ្ញុំរំទៅតួនាងផងខ្ញុំហាត់ទាំងអស់ជីដូនខ្ញុំលោកសពទីឲ្យខ្ញុំចេះទាំងអស់អញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំបានហាត់ទាំងអស់ហើយដល់ពេលឥឡូវមកក្រោយមកបានខ្ញុំនៅធ្វើតម្លានឡើងវិញរបស់ដែលខ្ញុំចេះស្រាប់ទេខ្ញុំបានរៀនពីក្មេងមកខ្ញុំយកមកតម្លើងវិញព្រោះវាដូចជាបាននិយាយថាវាខ្ទេចខ្ទីអស់ហើយយ៉ាងណាយើងយករបស់នេះមានពីដើមចាស់ដែលឆ្នាដៃរបស់ជីដូនរបស់ខ្ញុំតម្លើងឡើងវិញ
So when I was one of the footage that you saw when I was dancing Royal Ballet and the story of Inau Bosba, I was only 14 years old. The other story, I danced Priemto, which is another repertoire in classical dance. My grandmother put me not in only one role in a piece actually. So there are like male role, female role, and other roles. So she made me do all the roles. She made me just try to master different roles in one piece. So it was very difficult, but it was very good experience and rewarding experience. And that made me remember all those roles. And in my new choreography now, I try to use those those roles, those story that is already existing, but I try to put them together, those traditional work those existing traditional work, I try to put them together, but present it in a new way and to tell a bit of another story about it.
You can see this work at the Brooklyn Academy beginning the 2nd of May, and may we thank the organizers of the entire Cambodia Festival for giving us the range of Cambodian dance in New York in 3 weeks. Incredible. And may we thank Princess Norodom Buffa Devi, the legend.